Welcome to Middle East Briefing. The content of the briefing includes: a path toward peace requires more U.S. engagement, not less. Will Gaza ever recover? Israel checks reports that Hamas military deputy was killed in Gaza strike. Biden contradicts himself on Gaza red line, and 3 other things to know as Ramadan begins with no ceasefire. France is world's second biggest arms exporter, just ahead of Russia, report. A path toward peace requires more U.S. engagement, not less. Foreign policy. The U.S. must maintain its commitment and engagement in the Middle East and Ukraine in order to preserve democracies and end armed conflict, according to U.S. lawmakers Seth Moulton and Peter Meyer. In an article for Foreign Policy, the pair argue that failing to do so will have long-term consequences for U.S. standing around the world, as well as for American interests and lives. Moulton and Meyer highlight the urgent need for U.S. military support in Ukraine, where troops are dying because they lack necessary equipment. They also note the risks posed to U.S. troops if conflict in Gaza worsens and spreads throughout the region. Iranian proxies are seeking to force the U.S. to withdraw from the region, and the lawmakers warn that the U.S. will face a real prospect of war if Iran succeeds. Moulton and Meyer call for a message to be delivered that recognizes Israel's right to defend itself, but also requires Israel to uphold international humanitarian and human rights law. They argue that a meaningful humanitarian pause in the fighting in Gaza could reopen the door to greater possibilities for peace in the Middle East. Will Gaza ever recover? Foreign policy. The biggest long-term danger for Palestinians in Gaza may not be Hamas or Israel, but a lack of government altogether. If a ceasefire is agreed between Israel and Hamas, normalcy will not return to Gaza anytime soon. Gaza could join the ranks of Libya, Somalia, Yemen, and other states that suffer near constant low-level strife, endemic crime, and humanitarian crisis after humanitarian crisis. The Strip has a long history of being ruled by different regimes, none of which have benefited its residents. The Palestinian National Authority, PA, took over governance in Gaza and portions of the West Bank in 1994, but Gaza remained neglected. When Israel reoccupied Gaza during the Second Intifada, Hamas seized power in 2007. Although life for Palestinians improved under Hamas, Israel and much of the international community rejected its legitimacy. Israel's recent military campaign against Hamas has devastated the enclave, killing thousands and displacing millions. The United Nations warns that famine and disease will soon sweep the Strip. A ceasefire would reduce some of the suffering, but it does not resolve the most important political question of who will rule Gaza. Any non-Hamas government has to worry about both Israel and Hamas. The future will see fewer economic concessions and more force from Israel. Foreign aid, while necessary for survival, also comes with long-term risks. The chaotic post-war period could fuel further violence and produce waves of desperate refugees. Israel checks reports that Hamas military deputy was killed in Gaza strike. South China Morning Post. The deputy military leader of Hamas, Marwan Issa, is thought to have been killed in an Israeli air strike in Gaza. If confirmed, this would make him the highest-ranking official from Hamas to be killed by Israel in the 5 months of the conflict. The Israeli newspaper Haaretz has reported that the fatalities from the attack included Issa. However, neither the Israeli military nor Hamas have commented on this. Israel has said that it will not stop its war until it has defeated Hamas. Biden contradicts himself on Gaza red line, and 3 other things to know as Ramadan begins with no ceasefire. Yahoo! The start of the holy month of Ramadan has been cast into shadow by the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas, which has left Palestinians in Gaza in dire straits. According to UN officials, a quarter of Gaza's population is on the brink of famine and access to basic human necessities is severely limited. President Biden has become increasingly critical of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as ceasefire talks have reached a stalemate, and has called for a ceasefire to be put in place. Netanyahu, however, has made it clear that he intends to defy Biden's red line and invade the city of Rafah. France is world's second biggest arms exporter, just ahead of Russia, report. RFI. France's arms exports increased by 47% between 2014-18 and 2019-23, making it the second largest arms exporter after the US, according to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI. France is striving for strategic autonomy and is supporting its arms industry to facilitate exports. Russia's arms exports have fallen sharply, partly due to China's ability to produce its own high-tech weapons. India, a major buyer of arms, is turning to France and the US for better quality weapons. The war in Ukraine has also played a role in the growth of arms imports into Europe. Ronaldo scores but Al Nassr ousted in Asian Champions League quarterfinals. Associated Press. Cristiano Ronaldo scored in a penalty shootout, but his team Al Nassr was still eliminated from the Asian Champions League quarterfinals. Al Nassr won the second leg of their match against Al Ain 4-3 after losing the first leg 1-0. However, they lost the penalty shootout 3-1. Ronaldo missed several chances in regulation, including a close-range shot in the second half. Al Ain's Soufiane Rahimi scored twice in the first half to give his team a 3-0 aggregate advantage. Al Nassr fought back with goals from Abdulrahman Garib, an own goal from Al Ain's goalkeeper, and a goal from Alex Telles to force extra time. Al Ain restored their lead, but Ronaldo scored a penalty in the 118th minute to level the tie 4-4 on aggregate. Al Ain will face Al Hilal in the semi-finals. Why is the U.S. setting up temporary port off Gaza for aid deliveries? Al Jazeera. The United States is setting up a temporary pier off Gaza to deliver humanitarian assistance to the besieged enclave. The move is in response to the worsening humanitarian crisis in Gaza, where Palestinians are beginning to starve due to Israel's blockade of the Strip. The U.S. military has sent a ship carrying equipment for the construction of the pier, and President Joe Biden has said it will be able to receive large shipments of food, water, medicine, and temporary shelter. Aid agencies have said that airdrops, which the U.S. has been carrying out, are not sufficient to address the scale of the crisis. At least 25 people have died due to hunger and dehydration as Israel has hampered aid deliveries through land border crossings. Huge loss: Israel's attack on Gaza kills Palestine football icon Barakat. Al Jazeera. Palestinian footballer Mohamed Barakat has been killed after Israeli forces bombed his house in Khan Yunis amid the ongoing war in Gaza. The Barakat family's home was hit by Israeli bombs early on Monday, the first day of the Islamic holy month of Ramadan. Barakat, Gaza's first centurion of goals and one of its top scorers, represented the national team and the Ali Gaza Football Club in the local league. The 39-year-old scored 114 goals and was known as the Legend of Khan Yunis during his long association with the Khan Yunis Youth Club, which he captained. Columbia University leaders to get grilled by Congress at anti-Semitism hearing. CNN. Columbia University President Manoush Shafik and the two co-chairs of the Board of Trustees will testify at a congressional hearing on campus anti-Semitism next month. The House Education and Workforce Committee will hold the hearing on April 17. The invitation to testify at the December hearing was declined due to a scheduling conflict. Last month, the House Education Committee widened its campus anti-Semitism investigation to include Columbia, demanding that the university turn over a range of documents to aid the probe. The Department of Education launched an investigation into Columbia and other universities in November after receiving complaints about alleged incidents of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. Trump's freewheeling CNBC interview gives glimpse of the campaign to come. CNN. Former President Donald Trump suggested that Social Security and Medicare could be cut during a 40-minute interview with CNBC. Trump's remarks contradict his previous vows to protect the entitlement programs and have already been seized upon by President Joe Biden, who claimed that Trump had said cuts to Social Security and Medicare are on the table. Trump also addressed the issue of TikTok, the Chinese social media platform that his administration had sought to ban. Trump confirmed that he had recently met with Republican mega donor Jeff Yass, whose firm owns a sizable stake in TikTok. Trump said that he had not discussed the platform with Yass, but had talked about education policies with his wife. Trump also revealed that he could have banned TikTok himself, but had decided to let Congress make the decision. Trump's interview with CNBC was only his second with a mainstream media outlet since he left office in January. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Sixth Doctor, your resident observer from the sixth dimension. Today, we have covered a range of news stories, from the need for increased U.S. engagement in the Middle East and Ukraine, to the ongoing crisis in Gaza and the tragic death of Palestinian footballer Mohamed Barakat. We also discussed France's rise as the second-largest arms exporter and former President Donald Trump's contradictory comments on Social Security and Medicare. Now, let's dive into the analysis. The call for increased U.S. engagement in the Middle East and Ukraine highlights the importance of maintaining stability and democracy in these regions. The lawmakers argue that a withdrawal from these areas would have long-term consequences for U.S. standing and interests. It is crucial for the U.S. to provide support to Ukraine against Russian aggression and to address the escalating conflict in Gaza. The situation in Gaza is dire, with a potential humanitarian crisis looming. The lack of a stable government and constant conflict threatens the well-being of Palestinians. A ceasefire alone will not solve the underlying political issues in Gaza. Moving on to international relations, France's rise as the second-largest arms exporter is significant. It highlights the country's push for strategic autonomy and its support for the arms industry. In contrast, Russia's arms exports have declined, partly due to China's ability to produce its own weapons. India, a major buyer of arms, has turned to France and the US for higher quality weapons. The war in Ukraine has also influenced arms imports into Europe. In sports news, Cristiano Ronaldo's team, Al Nassr, was eliminated from the Asian Champions League quarterfinals despite his efforts. Ronaldo scored in the penalty shootout, but it was not enough to secure victory for his team. It was an intense and thrilling match. Lastly, we discussed the US setting up a temporary pier off Gaza to deliver humanitarian aid. This is a response to the worsening humanitarian crisis in Gaza, where Palestinians are suffering due to the blockade. The US is taking action to address the scale of the crisis and provide much-needed assistance. In conclusion, today's news has shed light on the urgent need for US engagement in the Middle East and Ukraine, the ongoing crisis in Gaza, France's arms exports, Ronaldo's performance in the Asian Champions League, and the US's efforts to deliver aid to Gaza. These stories raise important questions about international relations, conflict resolution, and the role of sports in bringing people together. I encourage all of you to share your thoughts and join the discussion. What are your ideas and opinions on these topics? Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.